Hello, my name is Anastasia Fress, and this presentation will cover my capstone project for my summer of 2019 graduation requirement in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in STEM for the Leave Houston Fellowship. This study follows my students and my journey in implementing new technology in the classroom. Last school year, I applied and was one of 10 teachers who received a new interactive whiteboard. Also, all 9th grade core teachers received Chromebook carts for students to be one-on-one in the classroom. With this initiative, teachers were asked to use the Chromebooks 80% of the instructional day, and so finding appropriate online programs and manipulatives was extremely important. The interactive whiteboard was used daily, and the students used their Chromebooks for online assignments, as well as the program Nearpod and Pearson Math Excel. This study focused on the program GeoGebra. Although GeoGebra is not a new program, I had never used it specifically to teach triangle congruence postulates while using the virtual manipulatives that GeoGebra offers. Because the school was requiring the teachers that students use their Chromebooks 80% of the time in the class, it was important to utilize these online programs. Another part of the study was to determine how students felt about technology use in the classroom. Because the 9th grade students were using their Chromebooks in all of their core classes, they were well trained in how to use them for a multitude of online programs. Many, however, had not used GeoGebra in the past, so this was new to both me and my students. The importance of the study stemmed from the research I had been reading in my coursework in the graduate program. Some major themes that we discussed in class were teachers' resistance to change or trying new things, and especially using new technology with fidelity. It was important for me to find online programs and manipulatives that helped the students take responsibility for their learning and required them to perform research and look for patterns rather than being given the information through lecture and notes. And for personal reasons, I chose the unit on triangle congruence postulates, which are SSS, SAS, SAA, ASA, and HL. I've noticed that in the past years of teaching geometry, this concept never comes easy to students, and they were not able to relate the postulates to other topics such as quadrilaterals later in the school year. I had also been teaching this concept by telling the students what the postulates are and having them practice and memorize it without figuring things out for themselves. In researching GeoGebra, I realized that there was limited information on the benefits of using it as a virtual manipulative in the classroom. There was a plethora of research that stated virtual manipulatives were helpful to students and teachers in that they were less time-consuming to create and more accurate for students to see the patterns needed to discover important properties. GeoGebra did have a lot of teacher-created discovery-based lessons on triangle congruence, so it was simple to find the resources I was looking for that I felt would work best for this unit. With those important aspects in mind, I chose the 4 themes you see here to dig deeper into the research in order to begin my study. What I found on teachers integrating technology was that there was typically low participation from teachers receiving training and implementing new tools and programs, which I reference later. The lack of teacher time teachers experience of planning time, as well as little to no feedback given on the new tools and programs, contributed to the low participation. I wanted to ensure this did not occur in my study. However, there was much more I could have and should have done in order for things to run more smoothly, such as checking the program's compatibility with the new interactive whiteboard. Other areas of improvement will be discussed in my conclusion. As I mentioned, I did find plenty of research to support the use of virtual manipulatives, and I chose GeoGebra because it is well established and many teachers utilize it in their classrooms. I had heard of the program, and after searching for lessons on triangle congruence, I determined this would be a good program for students to use to find patterns in congruent triangles. Students were to use the program to manipulate pre-made triangles by changing their sides and angles and determining whether the new triangle was congruent to the original. So it's different from hands-on typical methods of learning, but it still allowed for them to discover on their own. The final theme actually arose as the unit was underway when I began hearing students' conversations about the use of technology in their classrooms. Many of them complained when using the Chromebooks and made it seem like they saw it as a hassle. Some students even shared they would prefer to do more hands-on and pencil paper assignments. In a 21st century classroom, I was surprised by these remarks, as I know students are extremely reliant, and I would go so far as to say they are addicted to their smartphones and tablet devices. From the research, I discovered that using technology, students felt it was helpful, and they enjoyed it in the classrooms. One study that I referenced later did result in students saying they like technology in moderation and would prefer assignments, including assessments, to be done on paper rather than on the computers. The study was done at a Title I school, and students had school-provided Chromebooks and computers to use in the classroom. My 5 ninth grade pre-AP geometry classes had an almost 50-50 ratio of boys and girls, and some students were English language learners. The unit on triangle congruence took a total of 4 1.5-hour class periods to complete. It started with a review on classifying triangles, which used GeoGebra to guide students to the different types of triangles. This is how students gained familiarity with using the program before having to complete the discovery lesson. A pre- and post survey and assessment were administered. The survey asked them about their attitudes toward technology in the classroom, such as whether they find the use of technology as an important tool for research and discovering new information on their own. It also asked them about their knowledge and experience with several online programs, including GeoGebra. 90% of students determined that technology in the classroom is important, and they enjoy using online programs, but most claim to have never used the program GeoGebra. The assessment was given at the beginning and end of the unit and had 10 multiple-choice questions about triangle congruence postulates. The choices also required students to justify their answers, which was important to see whether students actually grasped the concepts being covered. The assessment score average went from 40% passing with a 70% or higher on the pre-assessment to 68% passing on the post-assessment. Although 68% passing is lower than I had expected, a 28% increase seemed to determine that students were no longer just guessing and were understanding the postulates on a higher level. Interestingly, the surveys showed an 8% decrease in students' views of the importance of technology in the classroom. I attribute this to the overuse of technology as part of the 9th grade initiative of using technology for 80% of the instructional day. As the literature review stated previously, students prefer technology use in moderation. The post-survey also included several open-ended questions asking about students' experiences on GeoGebra, and the majority of those responses were positive. One student stated, "I like that it has so many options, like the grids, for example, and it just makes me better at geometry." Another wrote, "You make your own triangles, and it is a better way to find what you're looking for when you're the one making it." This supports the fact that my method of teaching this unit previously was flawed by just giving the students the information. They seemed to enjoy figuring out the postulates on their own. There were a few students who shared their negative experiences with GeoGebra, but it wasn't about the math, it was about the lack of training in how to use the program. Their frustrations were with not being able to draw and get accurate measurements, and I think that was due to the smaller screen on the Chromebook being an issue. That same negative feedback that was received certainly attributed to the lack of training on both the teacher's part and the student's part. If the unit were to be retaught, more time should be dedicated to showing students how to operate GeoGebra before asking them to use it for a discovery-based lesson. When testing out the program on my classroom computer, I continued to find more helpful hints for students. However, when I tried to demonstrate those as a class on the interactive whiteboard, I realized that not all of the GeoGebra lessons were compatible with my new whiteboard, so I wasn't able to show the class as a whole. Instead, I had to troubleshoot with each student individually, and this was time-consuming and not as effective. There did not seem to be any harm in using the virtual manipulatives as opposed to hands-on lessons that I've done in the past. In fact, once most students did get the hang of how to use GeoGebra, they were able to get more accurate information and picked up the properties of the postulates at the same speed or faster than I've experienced in the past when using paper and pencil. They also started working in partners to help each other with not only the program, but in understanding the patterns they were seeing. The discourse that occurred during the unit was powerful, and students were starting to use the names of the postulates without having to be told by me and what they were called or how they worked. It was much easier and less time-consuming for me to plan this lesson and create the resources needed for each student. As far as students using GeoGebra to discover the postulates, I believe the overall experience was a positive one. Yes, there were some frustrations that students weren't able to work the program as well as I had initially imagined, but as their capabilities grew in using the program, it was much more meaningful compared to just giving them the postulates in lecture and notes. The collaboration that the students had and occurred naturally was something I had not seen when giving them a lecture. I could also attribute some of the frustration occurring due to students' prior schooling experiences. Freire used the term banking education to mean students just deposit information for students to memorize, use on a test, and then they forget. And this seemed to describe the way I had been teaching the postulates in the past. So students were expecting to be taught this way because it's what was the norm for them. It was especially the case when I had gotten behind due to losing days for multiple reasons and trying to catch up quickly. The fact that this lesson took 4 class periods may seem like a lot at first, but in the end it allowed students to take ownership of their learning. They determined how the postulates worked on their own, so it should be more memorable to them in the future. And I did notice that, in fact, when the postulates were referred to again in the second semester, students recalled the information faster with a better understanding, which limited the amount of time needed to review the postulates. So overall, it was time saving to spend 4 days, and it seemed to be enough for the students to understand them with fidelity, which was the intention of the study. Here are the items I referenced in the presentation, and you can find more in more detail in my capstone paper. Thank you.